We come into this space of heaviness. We come into this space to honor the heavy weight of over 300 lives lost since last November. But today, this is not the only place we must dwell. Today, we gather as a welcoming congregation to honor Trans Day of Remembrance, observed each year on November 20th. As part of this observance, may we reflect today not only on the memories of death, but on the richness of trans lives around us, abundant, though often unrecognized. The observance of Trans Day of Remembrance began 20 years ago. It began on November 28, 1998, when Rita Hester was killed in her apartment in Allston, Massachusetts. A Black trans woman in her 30s, Rita was a prominent member of Boston's transgender community and local music scenes. In the wake of her murder, locals organized a vigil in her memory, and in 1999, organizers in San Francisco held the first Trans Day of Remembrance vigil. Over the last 19 years, people have observed Trans Day of Remembrance both in the United States and around the world. Within the last 5 years, though, some activists have pushed for a shift in the conversation, moving beyond the practice of remembering those who have been killed to have a richer conversation about trans lives, about trans resistance and resilience. The energy behind this shift comes from recognizing the place and limitations of memory, that it serves a purpose, but takes on a certain ironic light when we remember only trans lives lost and not the trans livelihood that continues around us, although often ignored and erased. With another November, the names of trans people change color and fall, mispronounced, sainted, ceded to anonymous candles, anonymous flame. Rika Auke's words point to the mixed feelings this observance can raise, that no matter how important the act of remembering is, it so often comes up short in so many ways. As Unitarian Universalists, how do we go about this work? As a people of memory, how do we hold place for remembering the deaths of our trans siblings while also holding place for resilience of trans lives and resist the systems which work to destroy and erase trans livelihood? To begin with, why hold space for memory? To do so is an act of being present with the heaviness of death. It is an opportunity to come face to face with some of the uncomfortable realities of trans experience. Through reflection on these names collected and lives lost, we see month after month marked by loss. We see cities and communities marked not by one death, but many, sometimes several in the same day. And perhaps most importantly, we see that a painful, overwhelming number of these people are trans women of color. We see what Janet Mock told us we would, that trans women from low income and communities of color grieve our sisters daily, while also existing under the elusive threat that we too may be next. In meditating on this loss, we see the impact this sort of violence has on the communities it leaves behind. That in the communities closest to the people we have lost, the pain isn't confined to one day, but is ongoing. As a white trans person, I recognize in this time especially that despite all of my pains I have experienced because of my transness, there are many I may not because of my whiteness. To those of you we have named and not named, rest easy knowing we remember you too. To those communities you leave behind, may we bear witness. Memory, however important it may be in holding space, cannot be all we do in facing the reality of violent transphobia. It was in recognition of this that led artists and activists from Forward Together and the Audre Lorde Project to initiate Trans Day of Remembrance, Resistance, and Resilience. In their words, the Trans Day of Resilience Project is an expansion of and reimagining of Trans Day of Remembrance, not a replacement. We need space to mourn the dead as well as celebrate, support, and defend trans lives. This leads to the next steps to take from the space of memory. Resistance asks us, what will it take to undo the systems of violence that have led to the deaths of over 300 people in 1 year? It asks us, how will we use the privilege of living another day to build a world where trans people can thrive? Similarly, I think resilience asks us what that world would look like. Again, from the Trans Day of Resilience, before we can build something, we have to imagine it. To this end, Trans Day of Resilience seeks to uplift and empower trans artists of color and the organizations that support them in imagining a world where trans livelihood is fully realized, using art to be a balm for the spirit and fuel for trans resistance. In answering the calls of resistance and resilience, how can we listen to and lend our support to trans artists and healers? In my own journeys through trans pain, livelihood, and resilience, I seek to renew my spirit often. Earlier this week, I participated in a Trans Day of Remembrance vigil organized by trans leaders from Downtown Disciples and Breaking Bread, an Episcopalian community ministry. After reading in the vigil, we participated in a communion liturgy. And in those moments, I returned to a deep spiritual place of my childhood, somehow healed of the many barriers that have kept my trans spirit from seeking nourishment there. In that space, we participated as a community in the deepest meaning of communion I have ever known, coming together over a common spiritual meal of bread and wine, one which sustains both the body and the spirit. In that space, I felt a union of both remembrance and resilience that was a balm to my spirit and fuel for continued existence and resistance. While this practice will not be nourishing for everyone and will be alienating to many, it was nourishing for me. For me, there was undeniable power in receiving communion from trans religious leaders. Another source of renewal I turn to are the works of trans artists, and particularly trans artists of color. Frequently, I have found trans artists of color to be the first responders to transphobic violence. Often, they are the ones to feel the punch first, and the first to respond to the pain through healing works. The artistry of Alok Vaid-Menon, Jay Dodd, Rika Auki, Vivek Shraya, and so many others are, I believe, truly works of prophetic witness, casting light not only on what society all too often ignores, but also responding to individual and community-level pain through healing. It is in the light of their witness that I strive to work, that I may too bear witness justly by listening first. As Universalists, where do we go from here? Our Universalist heritage tells us that no one is beyond the reach of the ever-widening circle of love and justice. And as in so many struggles against marginalizing systems, I believe this work of widening the circle begins by listening. Listening to the artists and their prophetic witness. Listening to our trans siblings when they share their experiences. Making and holding space for freer sharing. And it's through listening first, I believe, that we can best craft our action. Throughout this month, Trust, transgender religious professional UUs together, has encouraged members of our tradition to donate to their Rapid Response Fund, which provides grants to our transgender UUs in need. As the new legislative session approaches, One Iowa Action will continue political advocacy at the state level, and since its inception has paid particular attention to transgender rights and issues. But no matter how we act, when we listen to and side with the witness of the most marginalized in our communities, they will tell us how and where and when to act. As we go from this space of heaviness, may we hold all of these things in our heart. May we go forth to help create a world of resilience.